Good morning, everybody. Hashidele, happy Sakadawa. Hey, our count on the mantras for Sakadawa is close to 70,000
It's
now.
probably
Nice.
super. I haven't had the new ones that came in this.
Yeah. So thank you to everybody for just pushing this along. I think we're going to easily. Geshe Nima wanted us to accumulate 100,000 mantras, and I think we're going to do it.
I hope so, I'm sure we will.
Oh, yeah, because if we don't, I'm just gonna sit and say mantras.
Well,
Oh.
and I do the same.
The other day when I was mowing the lawn, it took a long time, like 5-6 hours, so the whole time. So something like 10,000, mantras or over that.
Bill, we took her for her walk, I did mantras along the walk, you
It's
just,
easy.
whatever you're doing,
Yeah.
you just do the mantras.
Okay, let's start with some opening prayers. Let's again read this first one, taking refuge in generating bodhicitta. Let's read it the first time in English, and instead of saying I, let's say we. So we're all in this together, and we're all on the path, the Bodhisattva path to enlightenment together. Okay. We take refuge until we're enlightened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Through the positive potential we create by listening to teachings and the other paramitas, may we attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. And then 2 times in Tibetan. Sangye chadang soki chodnam la, jangchu bardu dagni kyapsuchi, dagi chenyang ipe sonam ki, rola penchir sangye ruparsho. Sangye chadang soki chodnam la, jangchu bardu dagni kyapsuchi, dagi chenyang ipe sonam ki, penchir sangye ruparsho. Now, with the 4 immeasurables, just imagine that you're completely surrounded by every sentient being that exists, and that every sentient being that exists in every universe has taken the form of a human so that they actually can understand and comprehend the Dharma, and that they could be brought along the path to enlightenment. As we say these 4 thoughts. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings be inseparable from the happiness that is free from suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment for friends and hatred for enemies. We'll talk a bit about this attachment and aversion, all this stuff, and how it arises in us. Now, with the 7 limb prayer, now imagine that you're just in this beautiful, gorgeous field, and it's the grass is sparkling like jewels, and then in front of you is this vast space with beautiful undulating clouds, and your guru in the form of the Buddha appears to you sort of like emerging, sort of like a rainbow, like you can see through him, but it's all these different colors. And that the guru is emanating multicolored rays of light in all directions. And then surrounding your guru, who's an aspect of the Buddha, are all the Buddhas that exist, and all the Bodhisattvas that exist. And then directly below the Buddha, who's emanating all of the light, you visualize all of your teachers, all of your spiritual teachers, and visualize them in the aspect of highly realized bodhisattvas. And so you have that vision or that image, imagination in your mind as we say the 7 limb prayer. Reverently, I prostrate with my body, speech, and mind, and present clouds of every type of offering, actual and mentally transformed. I declare all my negative actions accumulated since beginningless time and rejoice in the merits of all holy and ordinary beings. Please remain until samsara ends and turn the wheel of Dharma for sentient beings. I dedicate the merit created by myself and others to the great enlightenment. And then finally, we offer, keep that image in your mind. And what we're now offering is our how we would imagine the final results, what it would be like if all beings were enlightened. How would that look? How would the whole process of life and existence, how beautiful that would be. Sajipati Chokshi Ramri Rablingi Nidegen Ati And then send this mandala into the hearts of all the beings in front of you in the merit field, as you say, Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kam Yataya. So as you guys, as you all may remember, Geshe Nima asked us to begin each session of our study of Shantideva's 9th chapter with a recitation of a particular mantra called the essence of causation mantra, or it goes by Ye Dhamma Hetu, and also to recite and contemplate stanza 5 from the 18th chapter of Nagarjuna's Fundamental Wisdom of the Middle Way. And His Holiness often refers to these two particular this mantra and this stanza as being very important, and quotes them when he's in his teachings, especially when he's talking about emptiness. So while we're talking about emptiness, Geshe Nima wants us to sort of work on this. So I did a little research on them, and you may, I sent this mantra out on the last email. So if you have it, great. If you don't, you can get it next time. And I had printed out some. So this mantra is an ancient Sanskrit Buddhist mantra. So it's quite old. It's predates the Tibetan Buddhism. And the Sanskrit name is Pratītya-samutpāda-gāthā, and that means dependent arising mantra or essence of causation mantra. It's also referred to by the some of the first three words, or the first words in the mantra is Om Ye Dhamma Hetu. So it's referred to as Ye Dhamma Hetu. It's actually a summary of all of the Buddhist teachings. Pratītya-samutpāda is the name for the Buddhist teaching on cause and effect, and which he demonstrated how all situations arise through the coming together of various factors. The most common translations of the term Pratītya-samutpāda, which is the name of this mantra, are dependent or origination or dependent arising. But the term is also translated as interdependent co-arising and conditioned arising. His Holiness the Dalai Lama says, this quote, in Sanskrit, the word for dependent arising is Pratītya-samutpāda. The word pratitya has three different meanings. One is meeting or coming together. The other is relying on, and the other is depending on. So the second word, samutpāda, means arising. So His Holiness says the meaning of Pratītya-samutpāda is that which arises in dependence on conditions, in reliance upon conditions, and through the force of conditions meeting and coming together. So Pratītya-samutpāda is closely related to the very first teaching of the Buddha, which was the Four Noble Truths, where the first line of the mantra points to suffering, the second line points to the cause of suffering, and the third line points to the cessation of suffering. The mantra is also related to the concepts of karma, selflessness, and emptiness. And Najarjuna, in his explanation of the Madhyamika or middle way position, says that everything that exists does so dependently, and everything that is dependently existent necessarily lacks any independent self-existence. So this mantra has a lot going on in there. The other aspect of this is that it's in Sanskrit, and in Sanskrit, it's which is the language of many mantras. Sanskrit is considered to be a sacred language. It's said that when one vocalizes the vowels and consonants of a Sanskrit mantra with a spiritual intention, they become a sacred utterance that connects the one who's chanting it to the lineage of that mantra itself, especially if the mantra has been transmitted to the one who's chanting it by their guru, who is part of that lineage. So we were listening to one of our teachers, one of the tantric teachers, Andy Wistreich, and he was talking about this and how Sanskrit, when you utter Sanskrit, it's almost as if you're vocalizing with the Buddha or something like that. That you're getting the essence of enlightened beings as you're vocalizing. It's sort of there with you, and that's the power of Sanskrit if we allow ourselves to have that happen to us. Otherwise, we could just read it, it means nothing. But if we think those thoughts, it can make a difference. We can make a connection. The first word of the mantra Om is believed to be the first sound that was originated on the earth. The Om, or the Aum sound, when it's produced, it creates a reverberation in the body, which helps the body and the mind to be calm. So let me first read the translation of what this mantra is saying, and then we will recite it together. So the mantra translates as, those dharmas which arise from a cause, the Tathagata has declared their cause, and that which is the cessation of them. Thus the great renunciant has taught. May a blessing rest on this. So when they're using the word dharma here in the first line, it's referring to phenomena. So those phenomena which arise from a cause, the Tathagata is the name. It's the name the Buddha would often give himself, and it means one who has gone beyond suffering. So this is another name for the Buddha. So it's saying those phenomena which arise from a cause, the Buddha has declared their cause, and that which is the cessation of them. And then the great renunciant, or the Mahashramanana, that is another name for the Buddha. So it's basically saying the Buddha taught that all phenomena arise from a cause, that there could be an end to those, and this was his great teaching. And then the final word, swaha, is similar to when we say amen, like may it be so, but this is saying may there be a blessing on this.
Is another pronunciation of that soha?
Yeah, soha. So you could go when Lama Prasang, when any of the monks pronounce this word, we see it as S-V-A-H-A. They don't go svaha, they go swaha, swaha. And you could go swaha too.
But it sounds like soha.
It sounds like soha,
Right.
Just so you know, that the English transliterations don't capture the actual dialects and things like that.
So
Okay, so I'll read this first line once, and then we can, repeat it together. Om, and I would say, when you're doing this by yourself even, you could sort of take a little time on the Om to feel that, think of that as being the first utterance of sound on the earth, right? Om, and feel that, feel the reverberation through your body. Om, and then Ye Dharma hetu prabhava. Om ye dharma hetu prabhava. And then you can say with me, Om ye dharma hetu prabhava. And the second line is hetu tesham tatagato hyavadat. Hetu tesham tatagato hyavadat. Third line is tesham cha yo niroda. Tesham cha yo niroda. Fourth line, evam vadi mahashramanana. Evam vadi mahashramanana. And then the final, swaha. So let's go through it once with feeling. Once with feeling. From the top, okay. Om ye dharma hetu prabhava. Hetu tesham tatagato hyavadat. Tesham chayo nirodha. Evam vadi mahashramana swaha. Okay. May a blessing rest on it. Hey, hi. Hey, you have Arvin with you today?
Yeah.
Okay. So now we move on to the second text that Geshe Nima wanted us to look at and recite before each
Okay, I have a
of these classes.
present for you guys. I found this, you know, digging, clearing out the back.
It's an arrowhead.
Yep.
Yeah,
Or the native.
Arrowhead.
Native American arrowhead.
Sorry.
Where did you find it?
Out here.
Wow.
A little gift to the kids here. An arrowhead that we found on the property. Okay. So now we're into this stanza, and
Another word.
let's all if you all have this stanza on a sheet. If not, you know,
It's the bottom section on this.
yeah, this is stanza 5 of Nagarjuna's of the 18th chapter of Nagarjuna's Fundamental Wisdom of the Middle Way. So here it is. By extinguishing actions and afflictions, there is liberation. Actions and afflictions arise from misconceptions, and misconceptions arise from elaborations. Elaborations will cease through cultivating emptiness. So now we're going to go into a little bit of explanation of this. This particular text by Nagarjuna is also in Sanskrit, and the Sanskrit name of it is Mula Madhyamaka Karika. Mula means root or foundation. Madhyamaka is referring to the highest school of the Buddhist tenets, and particularly the highest sub-school, which is the Prasangika Madhyamika, which is Nagarjuna is the proponent of that. So it's the root or the foundation of this highest view, the highest Madhyamaka view. And Karika is describing a particular type of text, which we'll get into later. But this has been translated as the fundamental wisdom of the middle way. So it's the wisdom of this highest sub-school of the highest school of tenets, the Madhyamaka. So this is the foundational text of the Madhyamaka school of tenets, particularly Prasangika Madhyamaka. It was written by Nagarjuna, who was Indian scholar and monk, around 150 CE. 150 CE.
Wow.
The text makes use of arguments to show how all phenomena, both form and consciousness, are empty of having any kind of inherent or independent self-existence of their own being. It is regarded as one of the most influential and widely studied texts in the history of Buddhist philosophy. Not just this stanza, but the whole text, the whole 27 chapters of it. It has had a major impact on the development of Buddhist thought, and particularly Tibetan Buddhists. So the text is a series of stanzas or verses organized into 27 chapters that is written in a what's called a karika style of work. And in Sanskrit karika texts, they were meant to be memorized as an aid to learning by the students. And therefore, they made use of aphorisms that were both enigmatic and very concise. So an example of this would be a karika type of aphorism used in a Sanskrit text would be, form is emptiness, emptiness is form. Now that's easy to memorize, but it takes a lot of, going into to understand what is that exactly saying. And I mean, books are written about it. So what happens is that a teacher then will go through these aphoristic, enigmatic, short little stanzas and describe the meaning of them to the student, which is what we're going to try to do. The whole Bodhicharya-vatara, the way of the Bodhisattva is like a karika type text, as you probably have all figured out. Trying to read these stanzas, you're going, I don't know what that's saying for a lot of them.
Right.
They need explanation. So it outlines this particular one. The stanza 5 outlines the cause and effect process of achieving liberation from cyclic existence. That is very complementary to the mantra that we just did, the essence of causation mantra, the Ye Dharma Hetu mantra. So again, I'll read it. By extinguishing actions and afflictions, there is liberation. Actions and afflictions arise from misconceptions, and misconceptions arise from elaborations. Elaborations will cease through cultivating emptiness. So as we said last week, the wisdom that realizes emptiness is directly the main aspect, the main and indispensable aspect of the Bodhisattva path. Shantideva says everything that he's taught previous to this has led to this chapter because you have to have this. You have to have the Bodhisattva sort of take hold of your practice. I mean, the wisdom take hold of your bodhicitta and your practice. So, according to this stanza, the process of achieving liberation from cyclic existence starts with cultivating the correct view of emptiness. So his last line says this, he tells what all this, how you're going to get to liberation, but all the way, he goes down to the very start, what you have to do. And it says elaborations will cease through cultivating emptiness. So that's the first thing we have to be trying to do, is cultivating emptiness, which is what this whole chapter is about, this 9th chapter. So let's go into this a little bit. When any phenomenon appears to a human physical sense consciousness, like sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, if that sense consciousness is unimpaired and properly functioning, it perceives what most other properly functioning human sense consciousness, physical sense consciousness perceive. As opposed to say like what a dog perceives, or a ant, or a space alien, right? I mean, right. With their physical sense consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, what appears to a properly functioning human eye sense consciousness and a properly functioning ant's eye sense consciousness is not the same. It's not the same. In other words, a phenomenon's appearance, right? Its appearance itself is not absolute. It's not absolute. It's not free or separate from the consciousness that is perceiving it.
So wait a minute.
So this is not absolutely out there as well how we perceive it.
I'm going to be not arguing.
Good.
Questioning from a scientific standpoint. So the sense conscious, like the eye
sense consciousness,
okay.
and ear sense.
Okay.
Yeah.
But you have the eye. The eye has within it certain things that sense light, sense rods, cones, certain things that sense light. Now in humans, they have special cones that sense color as well as black and white. And a dog, for example, they only have black and white. But so that's the sensing of the energy of the photon.
Yeah.
Right. That then goes to an area in the brain that interprets that sensing. So when you say that, the ant sense consciousness And the dog sense consciousness and the human sense consciousness from the eye are different.
Yeah,
The difference may be just this presence or absence of certain types of cells, but they're also.
Process.
they are processing light and
Right.
shadow and things
Right.
like that. Not always color, not
Right.
always, shape, but for instance, a fly. Whoa, they're seeing something completely, their eye sense consciousness shows them something that is completely different than a human eye sense consciousness. And who knows what a space alien is seeing, I mean, I don't even know how that works. Say that they actually exist. How does that work? So the point is that we can't actually say that, what an ant is seeing is the particular shape and colors and things that we see, say, in this cup, or for sure a fly.
I guess my question
Yeah.
is that due to the actual eye consciousness, or is it due to the eye and mind consciousness together?
But we're just talking about the eye.
the
We're
eye.
Right now. We're just talking about the physical sense.
Not
So
the
it's
interpretation.
frequency, sound, hearing, taste, touch, that thing of eye sense consciousness, smell. So what we're getting now is the function of the mind, the mental sense consciousness in this. But even at this level of what the physical sense consciousness is perceived, we can't say that every sentient being out there is actually perceiving the same kinds of shapes and colors that we're perceiving.
Right.
So now we go to the word elaboration that Nagarjuna uses. And elaboration has two general meanings, one as in exaggeration and one as in evolution or evolving. Our mental sense consciousness conceptually exaggerates or embellishes or magnifies or misrepresents or even fabricates characteristics and qualities beyond characteristics and qualities onto an object beyond that which the physical sense consciousnesses do. So what's happening is we're mixing our mental sense consciousness, but it exaggerates aspects of what the eye sense consciousness is seeing or the sense consciousness is feeling, and it's giving it a name, it's giving it a function, it's giving it all kinds of attributes and qualities that don't actually emanate from this what is appearing to the physical sense consciousness. It's not emanating from the object. Then what happens is over time, the mental consciousness evolves these exaggerated characteristics. And what we develop them, we expand them, we enhance them, we even transform them until our elaborations cause us to believe that any given phenomenon, as it appears to our physical sense consciousness, any given phenomenon absolutely exists the way it appears to us and the way we conceive it to be, independently existent with independently self-existent qualities. So this is what we're talking about when we elaboration. He says, if we cultivate emptiness, elaborations will cease. So we're in the process of how we get in trouble. So these elaborations are making us think that everything we see that appears to us, I shouldn't just say see, everything we hear, taste, touch, everything that appears to our physical senses actually exists the way they appear to us to be, as independent self-existence with their own qualities and characteristics. And what it is our mental consciousness is really exaggerating and elaborating the meaning of all these things. So then we go on to the fact that this is why then two different people can conceive the same object in two different ways, whether it's food, music, movies, or whatever. Take, for instance, here's a good one. The widespread phenomenon of political leadership. One group of people can see a particular political leader as the savior of civilization. And at the same time, another group of people can see that same political leader as the destroyer of civilization. And this is due to exaggeration and mental elaborations. That's what it's due to. Otherwise, because it's not coming from the side of that political leader or the side of anything. But it's just a good example because we're so swept up in this right now. It's so divisive. And I just so, oh, how can this whole group of people think that way? They must be nuts, you know? And the same other group goes, these other people don't even know what they're thinking. They don't know what they're seeing. They don't know what's going on. That's what's happening. That's what's happening. It's due to this mental kind of elaboration. So you can see the problems that this causes. It makes us, well, because of it, all of these afflictive emotions then arise. That's the next, he says the next side is that misconceptions arise from elaborations. So, for instance, seeing one political leader as these two different things, it's a misconception. It's a misconception. And so what happens with a misconception? That we believe in them. We believe in our own elaborated misconceptions, and they become so habitual and firmly entrenched in our minds that afflictive emotions arise in relation to them, such as desire, anger, and all the other permutations of attachment and aversion that we have. So that's where he's saying the line that afflictions, actions and afflictions arise now from misconceptions. So these afflictive emotions now arise from the misconceptions. And then these actions that we take, the negative actions or behaviors of body, speech, or mind, manifest out of these afflictive emotions that we have, the afflictions. So these negative actions in turn, negative actions are negative karmas, negative karma action. These negative actions leave imprints and propensities on our mind streams that continuously entrap us in the pervasive suffering of cyclic existence. So this is where the first line, by extinguishing actions and afflictions, negative actions, karma, and afflictions, the afflictive emotions, then we can have liberation. But it all starts with cultivating the correct view of emptiness. If we don't do that, we're just going to keep doing this over and over and over again.
So let me go back to the elaborations and emptiness.
Yeah.
Line here and just ask if I understood what you said, that the elaborations come because, and you use these political leaders as an example, because of our misunderstanding or lack of understanding.
Are we exaggerating
of emptiness, which means that nothing exists independently.
Right.
Okay. So in that context, because if you have an elaboration, your mental consciousness is creating a misunderstanding of reality. So in that context, then with your example of the political leader, one guy is good, one guy's bad. I mean, the same guy's good, the same guy's good. What is the truth?
That, the truth, and we now have these two truths, this relative truth, this ultimate truth. Relatively speaking, one political figure in our world can produce these bizarrely different opposite reactions of people.
Well,
Just
wait,
like-
let's get back, I mean.
Ultimately
maybe
speaking,
what-
that political leader and all of those reactions do not exist
Okay, but
independently.
I'm gonna have to write on Brian's inquiry by saying, well. Let's take an extreme example like Mao Zedong. It would be. There's a potential that clearly one political leader is doing things that are
Harmful. Absolutely.
and so that's not,
But that again is relative truth.
well,
Ultimate truth is nothing actually exists
okay, but
independently from
then
its
by
own side.
saying it doesn't matter that Mao Zedong.
But what it matters is we suffer regardless, whether it's illusory or non-illusory. There is suffering, and the point is, and this is what we'll get.
I think it's a bad example of political.
No, it is.
I think it's too-
No example can be a bad one. They all have to work with this. It can't be. I mean, you talk to a Trump I'll take trump because it was so strong. Now,
Cup, a teacup,
all right, no, all right. Take this cup.
yeah.
I can elaborate and say, oh, this teacup is a special. This cup is very special. It's very expensive. Very expensive for what it is. I like the shape of it. I like the color of it. Somebody else might go, I don't like that. I want something that it's pretty and has flowers on it. I don't like that. So what is it? Is it great? Or is it, not great? It's all in the mind of the beholder. From its own side, it's neither actually. From its own side, from its just how it appears to the physical sense consciousnesses, and who knows what it actually is. If you're what it actually appears as to a fly, and what meaning it has to a fly, So there is no example that we have such strong feelings about political leaders
That's why.
and what they do.
Not a good idea.
No, but that's
Right
why
now.
I did it purposely,
Okay, well,
so that we can see where it can go. Because otherwise, if you don't use a strong example, you won't understand how afflictive emotions from a cup are going to cause you to suffer throughout
I
cycle existence.
understand, but with the political leader, you have the implication of the effect of their policies. You don't have that with the monk.
Of course you have the effect, of course, all
So
of it.
it's more complicated.
All of it lacks independent
Yes,
self-existence.
but if you're saying.
I'm not saying there isn't.
Revolution was empty and it's.
No.
Then you lead to nihilism.
No,
Oh, it
no,
doesn't
no,
matter.
Kalita. It can lead to nihilism, but that's not the point here in Buddhism.
You're-
What
you're
it does
saying
is that there's suffering results.
Some guy who wants to launch World War III becomes president, you're saying it doesn't matter, they're both equal and it doesn't matter.
In terms of ultimate
And
reality,
that's kind of.
no, in terms of, and we are going to get to this specific point. In terms of ultimate reality, it is all, it's lacking any kind of self-independent existence, right?
All right, well.
In terms of the relative reality, which you could almost say is a reality of appearances, there is suffering, there is destruction, and it is experienced, even though it can be escaped from because it is illusory. We can get out of this whole thing. But the whole point of a bodhisattva path is to see that even though the path itself is illusory, it still matters because you have to use that path in order to relieve suffering. The suffering is experienced. It is experienced. And this is all the whole point. We want to relieve suffering. So you just take it for what it is, but don't imagine that it exists. It is self-existence, independently self-existent. Say World War III happens, the whole planet gets blown up. Well, who knows what we'll do? We'll be over. We'll be on to something else, according to Buddhism.
We'll go to a different world,
A different something.
a different universe.
Right.
That's what Buddhism.
And of course there would be suffering along the way, but the whole point is that we keep cycling through the suffering. We keep getting reborn in it and reborn in it again. It's not as if we actually get annihilated. So what we want to stop is the suffering. We don't want annihilation. We just want to stop the suffering. And that's to get out of cyclic existence is the point.
I guess maybe, and I'm sorry I had to leave to take her, but I guess I'm trying to connect kind of emptiness with making a decision that is the correct decision. I mean, emptiness says nothing exists independently, everything is interdependent.
Mhm.
And therefore, because if we understand this, we ought to make decisions that recognize interdependence and therefore create a more compassionate, caring, loving, kind process by which we exist. Okay. But how do we know that, I'll use this in a minute, but how do we know that any decision we make, even within that context, is the truthful decision or the right decision? For example, go back to your example with the ant and the dog and the human looking at the cup. We interpret it differently because our sense consciousness and our mind consciousness interpret it differently. But who is to say one interpretation is correct versus another interpretation? And if all these interpretations are correct for each of these different sentient beings, then how do you figure out what the truth is in that situation?
Well, you just nailed it there. I mean, they're all correct depending on
Who's looking
Who's looking at it?
observing at it.
you know. So then that's relative. That's relative truth. This is why the Buddha, very wisely, one of the first things he taught was ethics. Ethics of body, ethics of speech, ethics of mind. And they are extremely important because they can guide us in how to behave properly through all of this, you know. So when we are tempted to, I don't know, let's say with a political leader, we're tempted to call them an idiot, to call them evil incarnate, to just use really harsh language and harsh intentions toward this person. We need to step back and say, wait a minute, the Buddha said, this is not the right way a bodhisattva should be viewing things. You always want to have the intention to be of benefit. You do not want to use these harsh words. And the harsh words harm us and the people around us far more than they're harming Mr. Trump, who seems to be oblivious to all of it, you know. So these negative actions of body, speech, and mind. Number one, they harm us and harm our ability to be able to be of benefit and to connect with others and to be loving and compassionate, because we get too caught up in the appearance of things and how we are interpreting those appearances. We need to think more like, what would the Buddha think in this situation? You know, how would the Buddha behave? Look at His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Holiness the Dalai Lama will meet with all political leaders. And you go, how can he meet with that person? How can His Holiness the Dalai Lama be meeting with George Bush? You know? He doesn't view it that way. He doesn't see them. He sees them as the sentient beings that they are, who he wants to help. And this is how we should start seeing all others that way. Including the insects, you know, including all of that. And, you know, all we can do is try. But I think we have to start. We have to think about it anyway. And think if it makes sense. And think if the other way we've been, which is getting all riled up and having all these afflictive emotions and lashing out and calling people bad names and getting into fights with our spouses, is that really what we want? You know, is that really what, does it make others happy? Does it make the household peaceful? Does it make the community happy and peaceful? Does it make the world peaceful? So it's just something to really think about. And it's quite, where Buddhism goes with this is very profound, very deep, very down to the basics, you know, of how this is all happening. So I thought I would, you know, make a stab at that since Geshe Nima asked us to. And you know, we can discuss it more too. I mean, I'm happy we can keep discussing it. But that is, I mean, what Brian, what you and Kavita both brought up are really valid points to be considering. And it is addressed. It is addressed actually in this chapter. It's addressed. You know, how can we see things that appear to be wrong or mistaken and not be angry at them, upset at them, and want to destroy them? Or how can we not go just into nihilism, saying nothing matters, nothing exists, it's all an illusion, it doesn't matter, lights out?
Well,
Christopher?
Yeah.
In this whole discussion, what comes to my mind is that, you know, I mean, we're all trying to have correct view. I mean, that's the basis of everything. It's the correct view of nothing is independent, you know, nothing is independent from everything else. But when we go into mind states of judgment or this is right and that is wrong, and all these things that we do as humans with our brain, we also physiologically put us in a state, we contract. Like those are all contractions. If that makes sense, it energetically, your system contracts when you are in aversion, when you're in separation, and it blocks the kind of the physiological, energetic experience of this oneness. So it really goes down to, I mean, I think this is in alignment with what you're saying. Would you say?
Absolutely. Yeah.
You know, it goes down to, you know, we have our kind of experience of being in a human body and our human experience. But when we're contracted, even on the most subtle levels of thinking that it's all separate or that there's one person's right or wrong, whatever, we experience it and it only enhances our correct or incorrect view, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Because what it does, all of these kinds of experience, they separate us from one another. They pull us apart from one another. And you're right, you feel it physically in your body as well.
And sometimes very subtle,
feel that
you know, we're not, and you're not even aware of it. So we're not aware of how sometimes it's so subtle, but it does have a huge effect.
You know, you know, if we're on the Bodhisattva path, what we want to develop is this connection. No matter who it is, no matter what it is, to develop that connection with them in a way that is does not push them off, does not separate them out, and does not want to, you know, destroy them. This is not what we're trying to do here. This is the problem of cyclic existence. This separation, you know, this affliction, this suffering. That's what the problem is. And as a bodhisattva, if we're on that path, we're trying to get to the root of the problem and then work on fixing it. First, you know, fixing it for ourselves, and then helping others to do that. So that's kind of what this is all about. And there's no denying that there is suffering. And that's the whole point. That was the Buddha's first teaching. There is suffering. Okay, folks, let's not deny it. It's there. There is suffering, you know, and it has a cause. I can tell you what that cause is, and there's a way out of it, and I can show you. It can be stopped. And so that's what this is all about, what we're trying to do here. Okay, so now, this wisdom chapter is going to be, we're going to be into this next year for sure. Let's see. Okay, so let me see if we need to do any little review. Basically, we talked about in the last session, we talked about we got into relative truth and ultimate truth. One of the definitions is that relative truth, no, I shouldn't say definition, but relative truth refers to the things that appear to us, and ultimate truth refers to the way things actually exist, the way things actually are. So there's an appearance, say, to the eye consciousness, the mental consciousness, the ear, the nose, all of that. There's an appearance of these things, but beyond the appearance, or together with the appearance, I should say, together with the appearance is right there is the actual real nature of what that thing is. So, but it's similar. I mean, His Holiness, what we talked about last week, His Holiness says that when we directly realize emptiness, the emptiness of independent self-existence, that's what we're realizing. It's the misconception that generates our afflictive emotions and our negative actions. When we have that direct realization, that misconception will be removed. It will be gone. It's like, it's this misconception. The misconception is this idea that phenomena actually have an independent self-existence that is not merely being superimposed or projected onto them by our conceptual consciousness. And that is the very object that is negated and proven to be false when we have a direct realization of emptiness. That wrong idea, that misconception is the very object that is negated and proven to be false when we have a direct realization of emptiness, which I haven't had, you know. So I'm just telling you what the experts say. But I mean, logically, I'm getting to see that. I'm getting to see that it makes sense. So that misconception, and what's the misconception? That everything exists, that it appears that we think everything actually exists independently, self-existent. That misconception is responsible for all the suffering in the world. All the suffering we're talking about is due to that misconception, according to His Holiness and the Buddha and Najarjuna and all of our teachers.
You may not have this answer on the tip of your tongue,
I
but
probably don't.
in terms of the development of these misconceptions, does self-cherishing actually is a prelude to in other words, do we develop a habit of belief in inherent existence because of self-cherishing? Because once the self-cherishing arises, or the self-grasping, let's say, as well, those are slightly two different things, but once our awareness of ourself and our interest in ourself, is that precursor to believing in inherent existence because we want the self to be inherently existent?
I would say yes to that, because what you're talking basically about is the ego believing itself that it exists, that it's independently self-existing me, right? And that's the thing that makes us when we find something that we're attracted to, we go, I like that, and then we embellish that thing that we like to the point where it almost becomes addictive to us.
Right.
We elaborate it so much.
Oh, that teacup with, gold or paisley design or whatever. I have to have that one.
Right.
One made out of just clay. That's not enough.
And we're not happy if we don't have that.
Right.
That is my favorite one.
Yeah.
Well, they always use cup. They always use cup because it's kind of neutral. But I specifically wanted to use a highly charged one so we can see the danger involved there.
Yeah, it's just that it has other.
It's good if we work through it, though. It's good if we try to work through it. It really is.
Well, and see how this concept relates to that and to a cup and
Right.
to anything else you insert there.
I will say,
Yeah.
as a Mahayana Buddhist, we should not be hating Mr. Trump or hating Mr. Biden or hating Mrs. Clinton or hating Mr. Obama or thinking they are,
No, but we
the saviors
should
of the world.
decide that we'd rather vote for somebody who says they're not gonna.
There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong. What happens in society, though, is this incredible divisive thing that's going on, and the media plays a huge role in it. The media is basically, we are all now getting our information from media. We're not having a direct personal experience of what we're being told in many instances. But what it does is it gets whole groups of people totally riled out.
Right.
And in terms of governments, we all know the adage, united, we stand, divided we fall. So if somebody wants to control large groups of people, the thing is divide them. I mean, that's just obvious, but we don't see it. We just don't see it.
Many don't.
Yeah. So anyway, I as Buddhists, we should think about it. Yeah.
I apologize, Mr. Maroney.
Okay.
I just wanted to take a moment from a relative side of this existence, this label that is my existence, and just kind of share, if I could really quickly. It's just in relation to what we're talking about in multiple levels, so I'm going to try to be quick. But for example, you see myself, this person that is appearing on this screen, whereas I have what is typically seen as a masculine form. But on a relative level, I myself, this ego, identifies as and had the realization that I am, for example, myself, non-binary, whereas I had my experience with that. And while at the same time, I'm grasping at a label for myself, which in turn does cause a certain amount of suffering, because as we're kind of addressing, there is a certain amount of divisiveness that does exist in our current society. And for example, non-binary does fit within the trans spectrum, which is receiving a lot of
attention
speech against it. So for example, that's one level that I'm coming at from this. At the same time, one of the ways that I have in turn encouraged my own suffering by having this understanding of this experience in life is that, for example, if somebody were to use the incorrect pronouns for myself that I would prefer, I have the choice then to become offended, become affected by, become upset, lash out, be harmful in some way, or I can accept there are karmic obscurations, propensities at play. There are experiences here. And so it becomes a test for myself in this experience to be more patient, to be more loving, if you will. And I apologize. I didn't want to cut in any more than we needed to at the time, but I wanted to share, because even if we look at physicality in the human experience, we often forget that intersex people do exist. And then we often leave them out of the conversation at the same time. And so there are so many layers to the existence factor that we experience, because yes, certain people create divisive boxes or filing cabinets to put us all in, and then in a way steer the conversation into a, well, you suffer because this group of people, you suffer because of these people. And even if there were some small connection, it's not the entire truth. Just because I have had to deal with conservatives and other people that have wished me death, like, it doesn't in any way, say that I can return and retaliate that. But I'm ending what I'm saying here. Sorry.
No, thank you, Marshall. You're making an excellent point, a really good point there. Throughout history, this has always occurred to various groups of people, because they are somehow seen or perceived to be different, and many people have suffered because of it. And I think your attitude is absolutely spot on, because what good does it do to fight back, to lash? Not, I shouldn't say fight back. It's good to stand up for who you are, but to then hate and attack and get involved in very destructive behavior because of that, because of the way somebody's behaving towards you, doesn't actually help you and help them or help the situation.
It's their
right. And ignorance can always be educated. It can always be education. I mean, actually, when you get down to it, when Buddhism talks about it, every being is a combination of male and female. And ultimately, a Buddha is the perfect union of masculine and feminine. So even in sex, in samsara, everything is split off. So one of the ways we should start to be thinking about ourselves is like, maybe I identify myself as a male and you identify yourself as a female. However, we have male and feminine characteristics within us that need and should be kind of unified. They should be in balance and harmonized. So I think we all need to deal with this issue. We all should deal with this issue. And if we do, I think it can be a much better world. We should see that we have these qualities within us all.
Everyone wants to.
They should be balanced. So that's a great point. I'm glad you brought it up, because it's right. I mean, it fits right into what we're talking about.
Thank you. That's very humbling. And I just wanted to mention, it's definitely why I have a great appreciation for Tata, because I want to say that it was associated with her that she had transformed herself into the male figure, and another whom was questioning her, pressuring her to take on a male form, had transformed them into a woman. And there's a certain lore about it, but sorry.
What I would say is a Buddha takes any form that is beneficial, whether it's male, female, or a rock or a bridge, any form that is beneficial. And we should feel that way about ourselves. We should feel, I'm in this form now, and I want this form that I'm in to be beneficial. As a bodhisattva, we want to be a benefit, no matter what.
It is an interesting example of this thing you're talking about here, you know. We have all been everyone and everything in all of our lifetimes. So we have all been different sexes, we've all been different organisms, we've all been everything.
Yeah.
And yet, you know, you look at somebody and say, well, that person has male characteristics, or that person has.
We have our
My
puppy here who
God,
just.
sorry.
Let me show you the scene.
But I
Is it
think
puppy
that
mommy?
these people become so attached to their identity
Oh, yeah.
and their physical and emotional construct that they don't understand and don't probably know actually that they have been different than they are today in their past lives and will be different in their future lives.
And you can see, I mean, you can see the problems that arise because of this, because we identify so much as a particular thing. And anything that sort of threatens that.
It's the ego,
Yeah, it is the ego. It is the ego. And this is what we're seeing going on in the world.
the root of evil,
Yeah, it's yeah.
which is us.
And that's that misconception of the ego is responsible for the suffering of the whole world. Yeah, so these are all really great points. Yeah, like I said, you know, I think maybe 2024 will be done with chapter 9.
Can I ask my other-
Vicky, when you're in Nepal, we won't cover very much.
That we will. You'll come back and go, weren't you guys just talking about that one?
You're dwelling on the same thing.
Right.
Can I bring it back?
Bring us back to emptiness, something to hold on to.
So, you know, thinking about emptiness, thinking about the Heart Sutra, you know, there is no birth, there is no death. There's
No, inherently existing.
Inherently existing, right?
Yeah.
So, and everything is interdependent. So what does, and maybe you have to have the realization to know this, but what does really emptiness then look like?
You asked that question a few weeks ago.
But I still haven't gotten an answer.
You know, I just read this.
Oh,
The
oh,
very thing.
But what, who's your source though? I want to make sure it wasn't like, you know. Oh, Jhana Rinpoche, that's great.
It does not have an appearance. Appearances depend on conceptuality. I mean, I can find it.
No, I believe what you say.
So no appearance.
I can find the.
But they always say it doesn't mean nothing. It's not nothing.
Yeah. In terms of what, I'm gonna say
Maybe it did
conventionally
have
speaking,
appearance.
I assume you're talking appearance in the sense of what we're used to. When we talk appearances, we're talking about some kind of visual
What does it look like?
thing.
Yeah,
Or could, if you want, you know,
What
it could be
signs
a
do I
sound
think
or
about?
such.
Or what does it feel like? you
yeah,
know?
right.
And
right.
he's saying all of those, all of our usual apprehensions of phenomena are dependent on conceptualization. In the state of realizing emptiness, there is no appearance.
Yeah, what this holiness
If you
said,
let me find it while you're.
what his holiness said is when we have when one has a direct realization of emptiness, nothing appears except the lack of independent self-existence.
Mhm.
In other words, what Kavita just said, there is no appearance. There's just a realization of a particular kind of a specific kind of lack, emptiness.
Yeah,
And I mean, so having not done it, I don't know, you know.
No, I know, I mean, I guess I'm trying to just think about the lack of something and the interdependence of something, and maybe they're just referring to the.
Right. I mean, Alexander Berzin says void. So it's sort of beyond dependence and interdependence. It's just void. It's like it doesn't exist actually. You know.
Surprised me, this, I don't think I've ever touched on something that is an interesting distinction that's made when discussing when you're trying to negate an object of, using analysis to negate an object of observation. Trying to use.
That's how they call it.
So, in other words, you're using your thinking process to prove to yourself that something doesn't exist. And I don't know if you've run across this yet, but it's kind of an interesting distinction that they make. There's an example that they use all the time for a particular type of negation where there's this chubby young man.
Oh, Devadatta.
Devadatta, who's chubby. Devadatta never eats during the daytime. And so what that gives rise to, so you've negated Devadatta never eats during the daytime, and his daytime eating has been negated. It gives rise, however,
To a realization.
he must eat at night. So that's called an affirming negative.
Yeah.
Even though he's negated, or an affirming negation.
Yeah.
He's doesn't eat in the daytime, but
But that negation
Something
affirms
arises.
something else.
okay, then they have then they have another example, they give an emptiness is, so Devadatta's emptiness of existing from his own side. And Devadatta is empty of existing from his own side. And there is nothing, well, you could say, okay, so he's a dependent arising, but whatever. They're saying that type of negation is a non-affirming negative. Nothing arises. Sort of
Right.
take the place of the void, so you're left with voidness.
Right. And
This
it,
is that, I
right.
mean, we only talk about this in the context of emptiness.
yeah. And these affirming negatives and non-affirming negatives and the objects of negation, the first time we heard these terms, it was like, what
Yeah,
are they saying? And it takes, it's why I've been avoiding using those particular terms, because you can just sort of go, I don't know what you're saying when you start using the terms. But when I think, we'll be able to get there and explain them.
Encouraging Christopher is give the explanation before using the term.
Yeah, and that's what I've been
When you hear
doing.
the term first, it's like,
Yeah.
what?
A non-affirming negative, huh?
Yeah.
Anyway, it's kind of an interesting thing to.
What they say is that a realization of emptiness is a non-affirming negative. Nothing else appears when you realize emptiness. It's not like Devadatta doesn't eat during the day, so all of a sudden appears to your mind, oh, we must eat at night. There's nothing. It's a non-affirming negative is a realization of emptiness, a direct realization of emptiness. So it's not even, what they call the flip side, what Tsongkhapa and Najarjuna call the flip side of emptiness is everything arises dependently. That's what everything does. That's the flip side, but it's not saying that is emptiness. Everything, that's what things are. Things arise dependently. They're not independently self-existent. When you have a direct realization of emptiness, it's a non-affirming negative. Nothing appears, not dependent rising or anything, nothing. Just that void.
And how do you get from the void to the interdependence of everything?
Well, you come out of that meditation. They say when you've had a direct realization, first time you've had a direct realization of emptiness, it completely alters everything for you. But when you come out of that meditation, that absorption, meditative absorption, you still see everything. You still see things the way we see them, but you have a realization, a very strong realization that what you're seeing is sort of like a magician's illusion.
Right.
They're not saying it is an illusion. They just say it's illusionary-like, because you actually see through it. When you've had a direct realization of emptiness, you're not fooled.
You know the trick.
You know the trick. You're not fooled into thinking this exists independently. You understand that it doesn't, although it doesn't appear to you that way. They say the only time you actually see ultimate reality, the only time you actually see the way things really exist is when you become fully enlightened Buddha. Can actually see relative reality and conventional reality at the same time, but not somebody who's just had a direct experience of emptiness. A direct experience of emptiness will get us out of cyclic existence, though. So it's a great first step, getting out there. It's very, and they say it's extremely important that we practice ethics while we're doing this. If we don't practice ethics the way the Buddha has laid them out, which is very, very, very similar to ethics in other religions, I have to say, there is a lot of similarities. There are some things that are not in other religions, but practice these ethics of body, speech, and mind. What will happen is our mind will not be disturbed. Our minds get disturbed because of all of our afflictive emotions. They disturb everything. And when we're disturbed like that, there is no way we are going to have the capability of getting into some kind of meditative absorption where we can have a direct realization of emptiness. Our minds will be too upset and disturbed. We'll be too attached to the ego and all the afflictive emotions and everything that's going on. And oh my God, did you hear what Trump did? And we will not be able to then sit down and go, all right, now I'm going to have a direct realization of emptiness. It just isn't going to work.
Yeah.
It's not going to work. So they say these preliminaries are incredibly important. We have to practice ethics, body, speech, mind ethics, the way the Buddha laid them out. Otherwise, we will never go further than that. You know, so it's all part of the way it works.
It's our job to keep going.
It is our. This is another thing. This is another thing. We should never, ever, ever give up.
Yeah.
Because by giving up, all we're doing is saying, this isn't possible. I'm just going to fall back into this bottomless pit.
Right.
Well, what giving up is like, you know, entering into nihilism. And what's the point of that? There's no point of that. We should never give up.
Well, those teachers, they must have, you know, so much time and everything that they brought these teachings to us. Now it's our job to keep going and because they have found it. Huh?
This is the whole thing about lineage.
Yeah.
These teachers that
They've
are
found
teaching
it.
us, they've had many past lives,
Yeah.
like we're having, where they have been waking up, developing their, you know, their skills. So then they get, you know, born as a, you know, Rinpoche, who can actually help tons and tons of people. So we're part of that lineage. We're on our way. So we shouldn't give up.
Yeah.
You know, we shouldn't say this is crazy, it's not possible. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, yes, we can have our moments where we fall back, you know, and become discouraged, but we need to get over it. We need to pick ourselves up and just keep going, because that's the only way it's going to happen. Yeah, God. All right. Okay,
next
now-
we'll be talking about chapter 9.
No, we're on chapter 11. Okay, so where we left off last time is that Shantideva was then, because this misperception of you know, things exist independently from their own side, because this misperception is the cause of all of the suffering in the world. Shantideva then sets out in this chapter to then dispute all these other views that don't align with the highest view of the Prasangika Madhyamika school. So this is where we're at now. We're now talking about what are called the 4 schools or systems of tenets in Buddhism.
And you know, on the website, you have a very nice chart for these 4 schools.
Kavita must have put it up.
Yeah, well,
I found it
I think.
somewhere, and it's really awesome.
It's really.
It goes through all the factors and shows what they believe.
I like the charts of Guy Newland. I like Guy Newland. He's clear.
Yeah.
And even being clear.
Huh?
Yeah, just some person did that chart.
Yeah.
Might
Somebody
be
who
what
probably
it is.
studied it really well. It's really good that we have a brief overview of these tenets and we have an understanding of how each one of these tenets posit the 2 truths. We've been talking about this, relative truth and ultimate truth, and it's important that we follow how each school posits these 2 truths, and also how each school posits the self, what the self is. So we're going to start with the first school is called the Vaibhashika. There are two of the schools, the Vaibhashika and Sautrantika. You know, and we won't even go into the meanings of these names. Just remember the names. Vaibhashika and Sautrantika are schools that represent the, you might say the Theravadan point of view. And then the Chittamatra and the Madhyamika are the two schools that represent the Mahayana point of view. So they're kind of divided to Theravada and Mahayana. And they're all important. It's important for us to understand these so we can see how we can logically come to the conclusion that Nagarjuna and the Buddha and Shantideva have come to. So the Vaibhashika school, this is the first one. And I think maybe we won't get further than this. I don't know. Yeah. The followers of the Vaibhashika school accept the existence of external objects, but they reject the idea that the consciousness, the mind, consciousness, can know itself. So they accept there's external objects, but they reject the idea that the consciousness can actually know itself. Their system also has a lot of other features that we won't go into for this purpose, our purposes here. The way the Vaibhashikas posit the two truths is as follows. Something is a relative truth if it can be physically destroyed or mentally dissected so that there is nothing left of that object for the mind to recognize. So that
would be
means,
like when you take a car apart, you disassemble a car and you don't have a car.
well, they go further. You disassemble all the parts.
Right.
So everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they have.
Right.
But you
They
start
have.
with.
Right. So it would be like, yeah, or if you took a hammer and crushed a rock with it and just went
Yeah,
all to the
right.
bits. So it's no longer, you can no longer say,
So if
That's
something
wrong.
can be taken apart and then you don't recognize it, it's
Right.
a relative truth.
right, and they also posit this with
According
consciousness.
to Vaibhashika.
According to Vaibhashika, that you can get down to the smallest moment of consciousness. And you wouldn't even recognize it as consciousness anymore, because you've dissected consciousness so much that you've just gone down to one moment of consciousness, one indivisible.
Okay, they're
moment.
saying consciousness is also a relative truth.
Yes, consciousness and, yeah,
Okay,
Conscious-
and
they're
you
talking
need
about
to break
consciousness
down
and
so
form.
that you don't recognize it anymore. as
Correct.
Relative truth according to the Vaibhashika.
right. So by contrast, according to the Vaibhashikas, something is an ultimate truth if it cannot be physically destroyed or mentally dissected, so that there is something left of that object for the mind to recognize.
What would be an example?
An example is when we're talking about material forms, they're saying there is such thing as many scientists now
Oh,
say,
it's like a
as there's the smallest particle that exists is partless. It has no parts whatsoever to it. And when we're talking about consciousness, the smallest moment of consciousness has no parts at all.
Okay.
It has no beginning, middle, end, no parts.
So roughly speaking, it'd be like a moment is.
The smallest moment that exists of consciousness
And the smallest.
and the smallest particle that
That's a
exists
solid
of
particle.
form.
So that would be
That's ultimate truth.
that would be Vaibhashika's definition of ultimate truth.
Mhm. Right.
And you take something that's a relative truth and make it an ultimate truth in Vaibhashika.
Let's see, a relative truth.
Patch it again with. the
Keep
hand
bashing it,
that.
but the relative truth is the way the external
I
objects
get,
appear, right?
I get the definition, I'm just trying to say, you
Right,
know.
and you could take like, you could take the couch and pull it apart, but we'd still go, oh, there's the cloth, there's the materials, there's
We'd
the
have to
foam.
end up saying that embedded in the couch is some ultimate truth, because there's gonna be a non.
There's gotta
according to
be,
Vaibhashika, there'll be a.
there's some
non-
partless particle here. And
Right.
here, there's some partless moment of consciousness,
Okay, we got it.
which, I mean, you can already start to see the flaws in this.
Alright, well, don't.
But I won't give it away. So this means that the smallest,
Back in class.
huh? Is it? Almost. The smallest partless particle of material form in the shortest indivisible moment of consciousness, neither of which can be destroyed or split, are said to have ultimate existence. These ideas are held in common by both the Vaibhashikas and the Sautrantikas, the other Theravadan school. According to Geshe Drakpa Gelek, the Vaibhashikas say that the self is the body. When you see the body, you see the person. And I think ordinary people would say that. There's Tracy, there's Brian, there's Kavita, there's Ajay, you know, we see the body and we're seeing the self. And this seems kind of normal to us. All right, the second,
That's enough.
that's enough?
Then he has to get
All right.
the rest of the.
So that's enough. So we got through a short bit on one school, but we talked about a lot of good stuff, really. It's all related. It's all related. It's all helpful. It's all really good to talk about. All right, so let's do a little. Let's see, what would be good? May this precious mind of Bodhicitta, this awakening heart and mind that hasn't been born in us, may it be born, and may any bodhicitta that has been born in us, may it continue to grow forever. And then the other aspect that has to do with what we're doing now is, may any little understanding that we may have, any understanding of emptiness that we don't have, may it be born. May it be born in us. May we have some understanding of emptiness. And any understanding of emptiness that is born in us, may that continually grow until we have a complete, correct understanding of emptiness. Okay. And may everybody be happy.
Amen.
Thank you.
All right, I will,
Thank you.
oh, you guys so welcome. All right, I will stop this recording and start the next one.